and welcome to this episode of the Fortnightly Dispatch, brought to you by the Baker Street Irregulars. I'm Steve Doyle, and I'm your host. Well, I am very excited today because we have a really wonderful guest coming to the show, and friend of mine, and many of you have met him as well. When you think of Sherlock Holmes dramatization, you often think of either a stage play, but most often a television series or a movie, perhaps. But Sherlock Holmes has also had a long and storied career on the radio. And that brings us to our guest today. Bert Coules is coming to the show momentarily to talk about his epic Sherlock Holmes radio series, the first series to ever dramatize the entire canon using the same actor as Sherlock Holmes. It's a monumental feat, and it's a wonderful series. Bert, I will right up front, has written an exhaustive and definitive account of his series called 221 BBC. It's a lavish production. Full disclosure, in my role as publisher for Wessex Press, I'm the publisher, but that's not why I'm touting it. I'm touting it because it's a terrific book, and I highly recommend it on its own merits. So we will talk to Bert about this wonderful series. And so without any further ado, I want to welcome him to the show. Bert, welcome to the show today. This is such a great treat to have you here with us today.
Well, thank you for asking me. It's a treat to be doing it.
You and I have known each other for a while now.
Yeah.
And I have a love of all things TV, radio, film, and stage, and all that. And I'm a huge fan of the radio, your radio series. So we're going to certainly talk about that today. But I always like to start by asking all our guests some of the same questions every time we do this. And one of I think people are interested in knowing. So Bert, where are you coming to us from today?
Right. Well, I'm at home, obviously, and I live in Kent, in the southeast corner of England, and I live on the fringes of an area called Romney Marsh, which is a remarkable area, largely farmlands, and all of it below sea level. So technically, I'm speaking to you from below sea level at the moment. The other side of Romney Marsh is an astonishing place called Dungeness. I don't know if the name has travelled as far as the US and your other listeners. It's a desert. It's England's only official desert. It's 12 square miles of essentially nothing. And the reason I mention it is that it crops up in one of my further adventures of Sherlock Holmes that I wrote for the BBC under a different name. It's Marlbourne Point there, but several people rather splendidly have recognised it from the script and the show and said to me, well, this is Dungeness, isn't it?
So it's England's only desert. I bet they shoot a lot of movies and TV shows there just because it's interesting. I mean, I would. If I was shooting a Foreign Legion movie or something, I would be there in the desert.
Doctor Who have filmed there. Because it's a lovely sort of otherworldly sort of place.
Right.
A few things have been filmed there. Ken Russell made a film there. Really? And a filmmaker called Derek Jarman. Has Derek Jarman travelled? Quite a well-known independent filmmaker over here. Mm-hmm. He lived there for a long time. He had a cottage in the middle of all this vastness. And he cultivated this amazing garden out of nothingness. Wonderful.
That's cool. Well, that's really interesting. So let's dive in. So, Bert, you're obviously well known as a radio producer, but how did you originally come to love Sherlock Holmes? When did you? I mean, did you come to Sherlock Holmes because you just as a project, or did you have a love of Sherlock Holmes prior to beginning to produce your radio?
A long way prior to the BBC shows. And it's funny, I can't remember now exactly what the route was that I took. I must have been about 10 or 11 years old. And I can't remember if it was the books that got me first or the radio series that was broadcast in the late 50s, early 60s. if it was the books, I mean, I could still very vividly see my local public library. I could go in along by the desk, turn left, and there was the fiction section, and there were those wonderful hardbacks, the John Murray hardbacks with the oil painting covers. And I can vividly remember borrowing those. But whether I borrowed them because I'd heard the radio show or because I tuned into the radio show because I'd read the books, I can't now remember. Either way, the radio show was an enormous influence on me.
It's really interesting because, you know, I mean, I know here in America, if you drop back a generation, you would have people, you would have had Sherlockians saying, oh, it was the Basil Rathbone radio series that turned me on to Sherlock Holmes. But, you know, we're at a point now, there aren't too many people left because the Rathbone series was what, in the 40s, right? 40s,
yes.
50s. But that first series that you're talking about, the Carlton Hobbes and Norman Shelley series, that was later because England was still doing radio drama.
Well, yes, that's true, and still is, of course. But radio drama was riding very high when I was young, possibly, in my estimation, because we didn't have a TV when I was growing up. I tell that to young audiences now, and they're amazed, their jaws drop. It's wonderful. But radio was my principal means of entertainment. And so I can remember wonderful, wonderful radio dramas from that era, mostly books adapted for radio. I like the Sherlocks. Original stuff, science fiction. There was a science fiction serial called The Red Grass, which haunts me still to this day, and I've never been able to track down copies of it. And sadly, probably like most of the things from that era, it doesn't exist anymore, which is a huge, huge shame. Carlton Hobbes and Norman Shelley were very much a Holmes and Watson of their time. I think every era gets the Holmes and Watson of its time. And I imagine that most of your viewers and listeners will be familiar with them. But just in case, we do have a short clip, which we can play.
Great. Okay. So hold on, everybody. We're going to play a clip of Carlton Hobbes and Norman Shelley.
We had been out for one of our evening rambles, Sherlock Holmes and I. It was about 6 o'clock when we got back to 221B Baker Street.
Ah, Watson, how pleasant. I don't know which I enjoy more, our little evening rambles or the agreeable homecoming when they're over.
Well, we've Mrs. Hudson to thank for this part of it, Holmes. Ah, Jove, look at that fire.
A fire burns its best on a frosty night like this. The lamp's lit, our slippers waiting, and a pound of new shag tobacco there on the mantelpiece just waiting for me to smoke it. Bliss, Watson, bliss.
That was really great. That's so interesting.
A lovely thing there. Two lovely things there. I always adored the way that Norman Shelley's Watson picked up, that was from the very opening of the show, he picked up from the continuity announcer with the little cough, and sometimes he actually said, "Thank you very much, sir," to the continuity announcer and launched into it.
That's wonderful. I love that.
The other thing about it is that it strikes me now as very cosy, but very bland. I mean, those are Holmes and Watson as your favourite uncles, I think. It wasn't always like that. I mean, they could have an edge to them. But it's interesting now to look back at the fact that when they first went out, those shows, they went out at tea time in a slot called Children's Hour. And they were definitely aimed at the older end of the children's audience, which I suppose meant people about my age, 10, 12 and upwards.
I love it that it went out at tea time, because that's exactly what it sort of seems like. It's sort of that cozy tea time Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
It does.
Tea and the Crumpets is what one has. But they fairly quickly graduated to adult slots. And nothing about them really changed. I mean, the style of them didn't change. They never dumbed it down for kids. And they never veered away from more controversial storylines. I mean, we had the murders and we had the nastiness. And beautifully, they did the Three Students for Children's Hour, which of course is all about children cheating at a university exam, which is not really a good message to be sending.
So, Bert, were you you must have been listening during the Children's Hour to
Children's Hour lasted until, well, a Children's Hour I listened to, certainly, and I caught the very end of Sherlock Holmes on Children's Hour. which must have been about the mid-50s, I think, 54, that clip was. And after that, Children's Hour continued, and I continued listening, but Sherlock and Watson moved to their own adult slot.
I see.
And I immediately moved with them, as was the intention, I think, of the BBC, and discovered a whole new world of other things on the radio, which I hadn't listened to before.
So is that the point where you began to sort of fall in love with radio drama? I mean, sometimes something will just grab you. When I was a kid, my real life profession is video and film production, and I was making 8mm movies when I was a kid because it just grabbed me. Was that the case with you and radio?
Well, it's tricky, isn't it? Because I mean, back then the technology wasn't available to the home person. I did have a really antique reel-to-reel tape recorder, which I loved playing with and which I recorded various bits on. But it never occurred to me as early as that to try and make my own radio dramas. The BBC over here, it's not the same quite now, but then the BBC was an amazing, not aloof, but apart organisation. Ordinary people didn't work for the BBC. The BBC was populated by these amazing godlike people who had no idea where they came from. And it wasn't until I actually started to work for the BBC in a totally different context. I was a music librarian at the BBC. That it occurred to me that anyone could get in there and anyone could contribute material or submit material at least. But before that, I don't think I would have dared to do it. I mean, it just wasn't done.
It's like the BBC.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, one bowed,
Yeah, I remember reading something somewhere a while ago about not about a Sherlock Holmes or anything, but it was about BBC radio drama, and all the engineers were like dressed very like engineer, like
yes.
Yeah, they were dressed like lab coats or something. I don't know. They were all very.
Yeah. That was if they weren't in lab coats, they were in three-piece suits and ties.
Yeah,
the BBC, very, very proper organisation.
Yeah, very buttoned down, very.
Yeah, and some of that is still there. I mean, it's still there to this day. Some of it, a lot of it's changed enormously, of course. But that air of, what's the word? Literary properness, literary correctness was very strong back then, and it's still there to a certain extent. You can see that by contrasting. You talked about the Rathbone Bruce shows. The Rathbone Bruce shows, by this time, by the mid-50s and not slightly later, were off into the wonderful, wild, wacky areas. I mean, I can remember The Adventure of the Poisoned Indian Chalice, or that sort of thing. The Adventure of the Wigwam. I mean, amazing. The Adventure of Sweeney Todd, I remember. The BBC were doing canonical dramatisations in a rather staid manner, with, as you heard with the clip, lots of narration from Watson, not only at the beginning, but inside the shows as well.
I thought it was really interesting how you said it was very much of its time. And I think when you listen to Hobbs and Shelley, I get that, it's.
Yes. It's relaxed, it's proper, it's correct, it's literary. The language is literary. That was one of the things when I did start writing for radio, I wanted to try if I could to get away from. And in particular, when I started writing Sherlock Holmes for the radio, it was one of the things I wanted to get away from.
Indeed. So how did you get into the BBC?
I was a music librarian in real life in public libraries. And I got fed up with public libraries because the funding was being cut left, right and centre. So I got in touch with my old tutor from library school. And I said, look, do you know of anything else that's going? And she said, well, as it happens, I have an opening for a librarian in the new library where I'm working now. And then she said three words that quite literally changed my life. She said, at the BBC. And I mean, I've told you what my attitude to the BBC had been, even as late as that. I mean, and I was gobsmacked. I mean, at the BBC, could I work at the BBC? And she said, yeah, of course, come in, have an interview, And so I did, and I mean, it helped that I knew her. But I got the job in the music library, handling music scores for the whole of the BBC, for the proms and concerts and all the rest of it.
That must have been like a dream come true.
Yeah, it was wonderful, wonderful job. I mean, I was working with people who've been BBC establishment stars from way back. It was great. And we had big names in the music world coming in as well. And that I was there for a couple of years. And the wonderful thing about the BBC is that once you're in, you can go anywhere. Anywhere is open to you. They advertise every single vacancy at the BBC internally to the staff, including the ones at the very top. I mean, there was an advert to apply for Director General of the BBC while I was there, which I thought was probably a bit overambitious.
But hey, you didn't even get in at all. So,
but one thing opened up, and that was a vacancy for studio managers. Now, studio managers is BBC speak for recording engineers and sound effects technicians and tape editors, and that was always seen as a marvelous job in itself, of course, particularly if you were technically interested as I was. But also, it was the standard way into production at the BBC, and being a BBC producer is what a lot of people aspire to. So I applied for that, and I got that, and I worked on a vast range of different programs, including dramas. Mm-hmm. And that was what was your first?
I mean, you had a love of Sherlock Holmes from Carlton Hobbs and Norman Shelley. So when did your new career path intersect with Sherlock Holmes? It wasn't with the series that you produced. It had to be something else.
Yes. I mean, I'd written and sold a couple of plays to the drama department. And then I thought, well, what would be wonderful to do? And I thought, well, wouldn't it be wonderful to do Sherlock Holmes? And I checked back, and there hadn't been new Sherlock Holmes on the radio for something like 12 years. And that seemed to be an acceptable length of time. So I thought, well, I'm not going to find out if I don't try. So I pitched the idea of doing The Hound of the Baskervilles. And I thought, well, they're never, ever going to bite on that. I mean, I had 2 shows I'd had on, but I was totally unknown. And Sherlock Holmes belongs to the big name writers. And to my amazement, they bought it. And I got the commission to write a new Hound of the Baskervilles, 2 episodes, 2 hours long in all. And then I got the wonderful bump of realization that you get with, yay, I've got the job. Oh, now I've got to do the job.
Oh no, I got the job.
How do I write a Hound of the Baskervilles that satisfies me and is sufficiently different from other ones?
As we know, it's a difficult story. I think it's a difficult story to adapt. Just because, I think radio's got an advantage. You never have to actually show that hound at the end.
Yeah, so that is a huge advantage. And to cut a long story shorter, I was introduced to a director at the BBC called David Johnson, a wonderful producer-director. And I wrote the script and sent it in, and we had that wonderful period where you back and forth with the producer, exchanging ideas, and rewrites get made and things get improved usually. And we cast 2 actors. We cast Crawford Logan, who was a favourite actor of mine, a Scottish actor, as Watson, and another actor whose name I will not mention, as Sherlock Holmes. And we were all set to go. Everything was set up. The studios were booked, the technicians were booked. And we had a preliminary day where we were recording the violin music. And we were in the middle of recording the violin music when the phone rang, and the production assistant picked up the phone and listened for a bit and said, yes, thank you. Put the phone down. And she turned to us and she said, guess what? We've lost our Sherlock.
Oh, no.
And there was a general sort of air of, what? We're recording tomorrow. And it turned out that our Sherlock had been offered a movie to start almost immediately. And it was a big part in a big film.
Yeah.
And the director then had a huge dilemma, because do you say, no, sorry, you've got a contract with us, you're coming in here to record Sherlock Holmes? Or do you say, I completely understand, go and do your movie? And he decided, I think rightly, that a disgruntled actor who wanted to be in Bermuda or wherever rather than Maida Vale,
was
not a good start to a project. And so he said, fine, good luck to you. And then we all sat down and we thought, well, what the hell do we do now? We couldn't postpone it. The studios were booked and the
I'm sure they booked like an airtime and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was all.
You got to deliver a product.
All set to go. Everything was set to go. All the rest of the cast was in place, and we had to find a Sherlock Holmes. And the director said, what we should do is we should both sit down and make a list of actors who could play Sherlock Holmes and who might be available. A lot of people don't often realise that a lot of casting is dependent on not who you want and who would be good, but who is available and who is willing to do it. And so we both wrote our lists and we compared them. And we had various people in common. But one of the people we had in common was Roger Rees, who was a hugely famous stage actor in England. I think possibly known in America. He did do several big things in America. He's in films as well. If you've seen Mel Brooks' Robin Hood pastiche,
yes,
way back now, he plays the Sheriff of Rottingham, which is a very subtle joke. Anyway, we both looked at this and we both said simultaneously, he would be fantastic as Sherlock Holmes. And then someone else in the control cubicle said, but he doesn't do radio. I mean, oh God, now we're going to have to start again. And the director said, we'll talk to him anyway. We picked up the phone and got through to his agent. And the agent said, oh, no, Roger has never done radio because no one's ever asked him to. And it turned out to be one of those self-perpetuating things, you know. No one asked him, so he didn't do it. He didn't do it, so no one asked him. And
so let me ask one question. So here you are, you're all sitting around a table making your lists and talking about. Is it difficult to divorce the way the actor looks? Because when you're casting for the screen or the stage,
yes,
you've got to take into account the actor. Does he look the part, right? Is that a difficult thing when you're casting radio? Because you've got to sort of, just...
Yes, it can be because, one's impression of an actor is always visually based. Always. There are very few actors, there were then and there are now, who do radio and nothing else. So it's funny. I mean, if you look at Hobbs and Shelley, they look like Holmes and Watson. And I think we have a skill.
Amazing. It really is. I'm surprised they never were snatched up and put on the screen, frankly.
Well, it is surprising, isn't it? And the same thing is true of Roger Rees and Crawford Logan. We've got a picture of them in costume for a publicity shoot, which you can maybe show now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see it right here, everybody.
Okay, wonderful. And with the sole exception of the fact that Roger insisted on having a false nose because he didn't think his nose was Sherlockian enough, they look amazingly right, don't they? I mean, they could walk out of there in those costumes and perform it on TV or on a movie. So yes, quite often the actors who are cast because they sound right look right too. Not always, but quite often. Anyway, he came in the next day and he was dead chuffed to be asked to do Sherlock Holmes. He loved Sherlock Holmes. And we got onto it and we did it. 4 days in the studio we had to do the whole thing. The BBC norm is that you can do half an hour's worth of material in a day. Compare that to a movie where you do maybe 30 seconds worth of material in a day. But wow. No, half an hour's material in a day. And you come out of it at the end with almost the finished thing complete. People, I think, have an image of we record the voices and then we go away and we put everything else on. But that's not how it's done. For whatever historical reasons, I'm not sure, they come into the studio with all the sounds, all the music, everything ready. And one of the technicians' job, one of the studio manager's job, and it's an incredibly skillful job, is to put in, as the actors record, the appropriate sounds at the appropriate level, the background sounds, the music, and there's another studio manager who's on the floor with the actors, who works as a sort of floor manager, whose job is to make the sounds for them that they could make if they weren't holding their scripts.
Oh my goodness.
So you have this wonderful image of someone moving silently around amongst the actors, making noises with cups and saucers and cigarettes and lighters and doors and all the rest of it.
Oh my gosh!
Not making any noises himself and timing what he does to the actor's performance. Very, very skillful job.
You know, it's really it's like part. I mean, it's a live performance, right? I mean, it's a part stage play, part readers theater, part obviously broadcast production. I mean, it's sort of a unique art form, really.
Yeah, but it's just in that respect. I mean, it differs from a live performance in that we then tend to work scene by scene. I mean, the scripts are broken down into scenes. We rehearse the scene.
But they used to do this stuff live. I mean, radio drama used to be done live.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's incredible. The advantage of recording it is that we can be much more complex with the sound design. You don't always want to be. I mean, sound is very, very evocative. It doesn't take much more than the hum of some pedestrians and a hansom cab going by, and you're in a Victorian street. I mean, you can go way more to town on it than that, and our guys almost always did. I mean, they loved building up the sound picture layer by layer. But it doesn't take much more than that. It's amazing how evocative it can be.
It's really cool. It really is. Well, I believe we have a clip from your first Sherlockian radio play with Hound of the Baskervilles with Ron.
Yeah. I mean, I think let's play the clip I sent you that begins, "Here he comes." I think that would best illustrate.
All right. Here we go, everybody. Take a listen.
Here he comes. Watson, something's happening at the house. Damn this fog. Down, Watson. He's a brave man, Holmes. Holmes, don't move a muscle. It's coming. Now, Watson! You hit it, Watson! Its eyes are on fire. What manner of creature? Watson, if we can wound it, we can kill it. Sir Henry, come on! Where is it? This way! Sir Henry! He's still alive, Holmes! Watson, are you all right?
Yes, my God. Look at that brute. What in heaven's name is it?
It's dead. Whatever it is. We've laid the family ghost once and forever.
That was terrific. That is really good. It really illustrates a lot of exactly what you've been describing. It's like I was there in the studio with you. So,
it also shows one of the things I was talking about earlier, which is that I was trying to get away from, we sat in the bushes and looked out and then a huge hound appeared. That strikes me as very old-fashioned, that approach to narration now. More happens in that clip that doesn't have speaking in it than does. And that was something I was very keen to try and push. And as you said,
there's room for the imagination.
Yes. I mean, when that hound growls, I mean, I think that's a lovely moment. I mean, overall, that strikes me as very slightly corny now, that whole clip, but it works. It grabs you.
Hey, Bert, we need to take a quick break and get a word in from our sponsor.
Hi, my name is Bob KATZ. I'm a member of the Baker Street Irregulars, and I'm the co-publisher of BSI Press, but more importantly, I'm a subscriber to the Baker Street Journal since 1973.
Hello, my name is Ralph Hall from Louisville, Kentucky. I am a member of the Baker Street Irregulars. I have subscribed to this journal I'm holding here before me, the Baker Street Journal, for 40 plus years.
Hi, I'm Monica Schmidt, and you should subscribe to the Baker Street Journal.
Hi, I'm Scott Monty from I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the website and podcast about the connection between Sherlock Holmes and popular culture. You know, the Baker Street Journal has been a wonderful sponsor of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere and Trifles, our companion podcast, for many years. And when you think about the connection between Sherlock Holmes and popular culture, the Baker Street Journal has always been there.
I have literally read every issue of the Baker Street Journal since the old series in 1946.
It's full of Sherlockian scholarship and humor. The artwork on the cover is wonderful.
People take their interest from today and imbue it into the Baker Street Journal in every single issue. And if you're not subscribing, you're missing out on some of the most fascinating and lively scholarship in the Sherlockian world today.
And basically, if you don't read the Baker Street Journal, I don't know why you're being a Sherlockian.
This is where it's at.
Okay, we're back. So, as we were saying, so you did The Hound, and did that sort of tee up your next Sherlockian project?
It did. I spoke to the director, to David Johnston again, and we both agreed that it had been a big success and we'd like to do some more. So we pitched to the BBC the idea of doing A Study in Scarlet and The Sign of the Four as a sort of mini series. Going back to the beginning, we thought we've got a great team, we could do this. And it took them ages to make a decision. The BBC is vast and corporate and takes ages. And we got the decision, and the decision was that we could do the shows, but we had to recast the two leads. And that came as a huge blow. I mean, we were so pleased with Roger and Crawford, we really were. But the decision was adamant, and David said to me, what do you want to do? I mean, do you want to say no, and we'll turn our backs on the entire project? Or do you want to say yes, we'll recast and you get the chance to write more? And by that time, I was writing full time. And I just couldn't afford to turn down a commission that was so big and so lucrative. I mean, radio pays pretty well. Not like telly, but it pays pretty well. So I said, reluctantly, we have to say goodbye to Roger and Crawford and recast. And we started it all over again. We got the lists out and we made lists and we compared notes. And Clive Merrison was a name that both of us knew and wanted. Again, very famous over here for stage, a lot of radio work. And we couldn't decide on a Watson. We had a great amount of problems with Watson. I mean, there were lots of good names, lots of people we wanted. So I don't think anyone was actually approached, but we just couldn't decide anyway. And it got nearer and nearer to the time when we'd have to do it. And then something catastrophic happened. David got ill. He contracted cancer. And he wasn't able to direct the shows. And so a friend of his, another colleague for the BBC called Ian Cotterill, came in. And he agreed to direct the shows, even though he hadn't been part of the pre-production process. And we three of us sat down and we were talking about it. And he said, David said, we're having this problem with Watson. And Ian said, oh, it's got to be Michael Williams. And the minute he said that, it was like a light bulb moment. Of course it had to be Michael Williams. Michael Williams was perfect. Again, very well known over here. But what really was the icing on the cake was that he and Clive were great friends and had known each other for many years and had worked together, both on TV and I think on radio, maybe on the stage even.
Well, maybe that helps the chemistry they have.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And so what happened was we set up the Study in Scarlet and the Sign of Four, and we came in, and the very first day, for almost the very first moment on A Study in Scarlet, it was obvious that we made a really good choice because they did click, they did play beautifully opposite each other, and the whole thing sort of took off. And I imagine, again, I hope that a lot of your viewers will be familiar with these shows and will have heard the odd clip. But we do have a clip from A Study in Scarlet, which is the moment where Holmes and Watson meet for the very first time.
Okay, well, let's take a listen, everybody.
You mustn't blame me if you don't get on with him.
Why are you being so cagey about this man? Why shouldn't I get on with him?
You don't know him yet. You might not care for him as a constant companion.
Why? What is there against him?
Oh, I didn't say there was anything against him. He's a little queer in his ideas.
What is he? Medical student?
I don't think so. I've no idea what he intends to go in for.
A mystery man, eh?
He's a first-class chemist.
But a little queer in his ideas.
Let's see if he's in here.
This setting room? Is that likely?
He was in here yesterday.
Ah, he isn't today. Anyway, if he's a chemist, what was he doing in there?
He was beating a cadaver with a cudgel.
Beating a cadaver?
He told me he wanted to find out how far bruises can be produced after death.
Good grief. I hope he confines that sort of thing to the hospital. If I'm going to lodge with anyone, I'd rather prefer them to be the quiet, studious type.
Stamford! I found it! Ha-ha! Stamford! I found it! I knew I would.
Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
How do you do?
How are you? You've been in Afghanistan, I perceive.
How on earth did you know that?
Never mind. Come and look at this. Now, come on.
That's wonderful. We don't get that moment dramatized very often.
No, it was very rare. Very rare. Even Hobbs and Shelley hadn't done it. I believe they did a study in Scarlet, but they didn't do the first meeting. They couldn't. They were way too old. It wouldn't have worked.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I mean, several nice things in it. I think. I mean, Clive's energy. And he bursts out the door with, I found it. It's wonderful. And the contrast with Michael being all laconic and saying, oh, well, congratulations, you found it. Well done. What is it? It is nice, I think. And it just took off from there. The Sign of the Four went as well. We had a wonderful, wonderful guest star in the Sign of the Four in the shape of Brian Blessed.
Oh,
I'm quite sure that Brian Blessed is known to almost all of your listeners.
Oh, yes. He's very well known here in the States.
Well, exactly, yes. And what's pleasing about using Brian Blessed for, he played Jonathan Small, the one-legged convict. What was pleasing is that, again, it's an image thing. People think of Brian Blessed as this huge, massive, loud
Professor Challenger,
Absolutely. Well, yeah, he's never played it. What a waste that he's never played it. But in fact, he's capable of doing very nuanced, very quiet, very subtle performances. And that's what we got with Jonathan Small. It was a marvellous, marvellous performance.
Yeah, that's cool.
And again, happily, they went down well. And again, happily, David wasn't able to continue, but I spoke to the BBC saying, look, we've now got this wonderful new team. Why don't we do a short series of half a dozen of the best of the short stories? Right? And
you did not set out at the beginning to dramatize the entire canon. You were just
absolutely not
taking it in the bite-sized chunks that they would give it to you.
No, I didn't even think that way. I wanted to cherry pick the best of the short stories and do those. And my ambition didn't go any further than that. And I spoke to the head of radio drama, and he said, yeah, it's an interesting idea. We'll think about it. And again, they thought about it for an enormously long time. And I finally got a phone call saying, we'd like you to come to Broadcasting House and talk about Sherlock Holmes. So I went to Broadcasting House, which is the BBC headquarters in London, where the principal studios are. And I was shown into a room, and sitting in the room were these two guys who I didn't know. And I was introduced to them as Peter Mackie and Vincent McInerney, fellow writers. And this time it was my turn to have my jaw drop. What were these fellow writers doing in my 6-part series that I could handle perfectly well myself? Thank you very much. And it was then we were told the plan was to do the lot, the entire canon.
Wow.
And I thought, well, that's wonderful, but I wish I was doing it on my own. Partly because I knew that there would be stylistic problems in keeping it consistent.
Right.
And it turned out that there were slightly, but we overcome that. And it turned then the chat to, well, who's going to do which story? How are we going to start? And the decision was that we were going to do them in book form. So we start with the adventures, do all, 12, 13 adventures, and then move on to the memoirs and all the rest of it. And the assistant head of radio drama said, I've got a perfect method of deciding who's going to do which story. And he had a list of the stories, And he went down going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 against the titles. And he had 3 pieces of paper with 1, 2, and 3. And he dropped them into a receptacle, which happened to be an empty waste paper basket. Should have been a deerstalker. And he said, okay, take one. So the 3 of us, and we each reached in and solemnly took a number. And thank goodness I got number 1, which meant I could start the whole thing rolling. I would have been really upset if I hadn't got number 1. And I got a good choice. I mean, I can't remember now exactly which ones I got, but I got good ones in the first one. And so we all went away and we wrote our scripts, and we had 2 new producer directors.
At this point, it was now a major thing. I mean, it
had become a big
knock off half a dozen episodes, and no, this is like a full major series now.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it was a very unusual thing to do that number of shows dedicated to one subject over quite such a period of time, because we knew it was going to be one series a year. Excuse me.
So I got to watch the time, but I want to ask you about the actual, how it's actually done. What's it like in the studio when you're recording one of these episodes?
Yes, thank you for asking that. I think a lot of people have this image of we all sit around a table and we record the voices, and then, as I said before, everything gets added on. That's not how it's done at all. We build sets in the studio. The actors are free to move around, to act visually, because it helps their voices. We have props. We have everything that we need, except it doesn't look right. Again, it's another tribute to the actors, I think, that they can work in these really unprepossessing surroundings of a BBC radio studio, with mouldy old tables and screens and doors that are part of a box that open and close. But the best way to really answer your question, I think, is to show you this clip. This is a short clip of Clive Merrison and Michael Williams recording a scene from The Solitary Cyclist. It's the scene after Holmes has had a fight with Woodley, the bully, and Watson is tending his wounds. And you'll see Clive and Michael and the spot effects operator, Wilfredo Acosta, providing the sounds.
Okay, great. So let's take a look.
You came between us? Okay.
We're going to go for a take. Do you mind if they leave the lights on, just let them film as we go?
Yeah, that's fine. Just backing off there and moving on 8.
I'll follow you.
Right.
Fine. Okay, stand by, light coming.
Oh! Sorry. Keep still.
It was delicious, Watson, delicious. Mm-hmm. I get so little exercise. It's always a treat.
Good job you kept up the boxing.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, it seems I owe you an apology.
What else for?
Well, however enjoyable it may have been, my day on the Surrey border hasn't been much more profitable than your own.
Oh, I don't know about that. You found out that this Williamson's a clergyman.
Yes. And most of the landlord's other comments painted him as distinctly unecclesiastical. There's been some right goings-on at the hall, sir. Some of his visitors, they're a warm lot, sir. Very warm lot.
Yes, especially your friend Woodley.
I didn't think he'd be far away. There's a link between Woodley and Carruthers that lies at the heart of all this. Yeah. Sooner or later, it'll come to light.
That was great. That was so interesting. It's one thing if you just heard it, it's a completely different experience than watching it, right?
I should say thank you to Clive Merrison, who gave me permission to show you that clip. That was from an internal BBC training film. I should have perhaps sort of set up that it was unedited, it had the time code and everything, but I hope that didn't spoil your enjoyment.
Oh, no, not at all. Thank you, Mr. Merrison. So, now the series is rolling along, it's going well, and but at some point you have to change Watson's.
Yeah, we thank heaven we got through the canon. We did all the short stories, we then did The Valley of Fear, and deliberately saved for the big finish was The Hound of the Baskervilles, which we did. I rewrote my earlier script for Clive and Michael. One advantage of working with the same 2 actors is that you pick up their rhythms. A lot of the way I wrote Holmes and Watson towards the end was listening to Clive and Michael chatting and exchanging mock insults and all the rest of it, which was wonderful for me because I was able to bring it in. And it all finished and we thought, that's it, it's done. And then the BBC said, we'd be interested in doing some more because the audience figures were good, the CD sales, as they were very strong. And I said, fine. And I proposed this idea of taking the unrecorded cases, the ones that are just mentioned in the canon, doing a series of them. And they said, fine, let's set up a series of 5. So I wrote 5, and I wrote them for Clive and Michael. And again, it's amazing the way these things come down in cycles. We were all ready to go. The cast had all been booked. The studios, I think, had been booked. And word came through that Michael Williams was ill. And like David Johnston before him, he'd contracted cancer. And everything went on hold. It was interesting. Again, we were in the position where the producer could have said, let's scrub the whole thing. But what he was sufficiently senior at the BBC to say, no, we'll hold it. We'll keep everything in readiness for when Michael is well enough to do it. And that was the positive attitude that went into the whole project. And of course, eventually word came through sadly that Michael wasn't well enough to do it. And in fact died. And then we had, again, cyclically, what do we do about Watson? And the lists came out and we went through listing names. And it was very, very difficult to follow Michael. Michael was a very, very strong, very good Watson.
It was probably a disadvantage for the people that you were considering because you had him in your mind, right?
Yeah, it was very difficult. We had to say to ourselves, we need someone who'll bring the same qualities to Watson, the same integrity, the same strength, the same willingness to stand up to Holmes, the same romantic streak. But we don't want someone to come in and do a Michael Williams impression. It's insulting to the actor, it's insulting to the audience, it's insulting to Clive to do that. We need someone who's strong enough to bring themselves to the part and at the same time encapsulate everything that Michael brought to it. And eventually the choice was made that we would cast Andrew Sachs. Now, Andrew Sachs was enormously experienced in radio. He was a playwright himself. He'd written for radio as well as other areas. But he was best known then, and I think now, for one very iconic visual role, which is that Andrew Sachs was Manuel in Fawlty Towers. I'm sure Fawlty Towers must have played in the US.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes. Sherlock.
A lot of eyebrows went up when we announced that, that Andrew was going to play.
It's really a testament to what a good actor he is, because it's hard for me. It would not be a natural thing to go from Manuel to Watson, but
you were talking earlier about, do we cast people who look the part?
Right, exactly.
And I mean, we do have a publicity still of Clive and Andrew, I think, which perhaps you'd like to put up.
Take a look at that. Yep, there we go.
That was taken in the Sherlock Holmes pub in London. We wanted to get into the reproduction of the City Room and do a picture there, but it didn't prove possible, sadly. But that's a nice picture, nice serious picture. And so Andrew came in, and on the very first day, he said to me, and he said to Patrick Rayner, the director, the only Watson I've really had experience of is Nigel Bruce. And both of us together said, we don't want Nigel Bruce. No offense to Nigel Bruce. Nigel Bruce is a wonderful actor, was a wonderful, brilliant comic actor. He wasn't a strong Watson for me at all. Andrew said, no, okay. Patrick said something that Andrew later described as the best advice he'd ever been given as an actor. Patrick said, just say the words, Andrew, just say the words. Let your own personality come through the words. And Andrew said, well, okay, that's what I'll do. And that's what he did. And it worked wonderfully. He was different from Michael. He was his own man, his own Watson, but he brought everything to it that we wanted. Everything, absolutely.
Yeah, he's great. No doubt about it. Well, Bert, we're getting short on time.
Okay.
So let's do a kind of a follow-up question, and then I know that you have something that you would like to kind of go out on here. So
I would, yes, thank you.
So what's the do you have any plans for any future Sherlockian radio drama, or what? Where?
Radio, no. The BBC, when we did 16 episodes of The Further Adventures, and the BBC thought that was probably enough, and I thought that was probably enough. I hate to put myself in the same room even as Conan Doyle, but I understood completely why he wanted to move away from Holmes and Watson. Yeah. It was getting very difficult. The plotting was getting difficult, and I didn't want, above everything else, I didn't want to start repeating myself. So I thought, no. And I pitched a two-parter to end the final series. And I deliberately wrote the end of that two-parter to bring the curtain down on the whole project. It had been 20 years by this point from doing A Study in Scarlet to doing the Marlborough Point mystery, which is what the two-parter was. And the clip I'd like to play you is the very last, or from the very last scene of the second episode of the Marlborough Point mystery. It was the final thing we recorded. It was the last incarnation for us of Holmes and Watson at the BBC. And I hope I managed to do that moment justice, but that is something that you'll have to judge.
We'll take a listen to that in 1 second. I just want to say thank you for being with us today, Bert.
You're very welcome.
You and I go back a ways. I do want to, like I mentioned in the introduction, I want to highly recommend.
Buy the book.
Yes. This book is it's sort of the definitive story of everything we've been talking about today, and it's marvelous. And so highly recommended. All right, we'll listen to this clip and close the show. Thank you so much, Bert. I think this has been terrific. And I urge everybody to find this radio series and give it a listen. Take care, Bert, and here we go.
Would you mind?
Oh, not in the least.
Thank you.
You played that for me just a few days after we first moved in here.
Did I?
I didn't have the least idea what to make of you.
Have you now?
Oh, I think so, yes. Maybe. You know, I love these moments. The case is solved, everything's over, we're back here in the warmth and comfort.
Until the next client comes along.
And then off we'll go again. I wish it could always be like this.
Watson, it will.
How can it? Nothing lasts forever.
It will because of you. Because of your stories. Don't you see? It doesn't matter what happens here, in the real world. We're more than reality, you and I. You, my friend, have made us immortal.
That's quite a thought.
It's the truth. As long as there are mysteries and murders...
And fog and fear.
And terror and injustice.
Then Sherlock Holmes, private consulting detective.
And John H. Watson, chronicler, comrade and friend.
Will be ready.
Waiting for the dramatic ring at the doorbell.
The game's afoot.
Wow, wasn't that wonderful? That was just great. I want to thank you, Bert, for being with us today and sharing that with us too. And to all you listeners, I want to also say thank you. We are getting such wonderful comments and such a beautiful response to the series. It's so gratifying. Kind of embarrassing, actually, is that with your comments. It's very humbling and wonderful, and I'm so grateful for your comments and your feedback. But please keep sending suggestions and feedback. Your feedback sometimes is quite constructive and helpful, and suggestions for future guests are always welcome. And so I just really want to say thank you. So keep watching. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, share the podcast all over whatever Facebook Sherlockian Facebook pages you frequent, and we're all kind of in it together. So it's a great thing. We have another great, wonderful guest coming next time. So do not, don't go anywhere, and we'll see you then.